The subtle Dharma is seen in 100,000 eons. See, hear, receive. Understand Tathagata. Liberate beings. Let us all give rise to the unsurpassed bodhicitta. We will continue our discussion on the wisdom sword that destroys demons, composed by the omniscient Mipam Rinpoche. These are the supreme instructions for destroying the army of afflictive demons. Yesterday, we covered part of the text. Today, we will continue as planned. In the past, my mind was bound, causing me to lose happiness. Alas, can't we see we have fallen into this demon of the mind? Here, it is all explained in detail for your understanding. It says that, in fact, every ordinary person actually does truly have various afflictions and suffering. What exactly is the source of suffering and all afflictions? It is we have not recognized the nature of our mind. All kinds of confusing and deluded thoughts and our persistent self-clinging indeed bind us in our daily lives. And this did not just start now. In fact, since beginningless time, from the moment we beings came into this world, it has always been binding my mind. This kind of demon has truly been binding my mind. I have completely lost all of my happiness, every bit of, and have experienced countless difficult sufferings. So in the worlds of the past, I was truly pitiable. Alas, how truly pitiful I was. Why did I not even truly see for myself? Not even once that such a terrifying demon had entered my own heart. Of course, each of us may certainly have varied or different understandings of the sutras or tantras. If you truly come to understand your own mind and all that it contains, then many things about the situation start. Here, sometimes we regard self-clinging as a demon, and sometimes as the deep and underlying root of suffering, different names. But in reality, it is our judgments, our self-clinging discrimination. If the true nature of this thought is not recognized, then all kinds of suffering and hardship will follow one after another without any interruption at all whatsoever. But when you recognize it in that moment, its power will start to weaken more and more. As mentioned before, in the heart essence of the Guru, it says, you are to your Guru or Taoist. You give rise to wrong views. If you truly recognize, even if only for a moment, that you are being possessed by it, then quite simply, from that moment on, there will be no more disturbance, and your vows will also be purified. That was explained. And so, no matter what, if we see the nature of the mind, the mental afflictions will naturally disappear. When the mental afflictions are gone, we will attain happiness in both body and mind. So in many exoteric sutras and tantric scriptures from various traditions, what is said is essentially the same. Isn't it also mentioned in the entering the path? In the past, I was truly under your control, but today I have finally awakened. In the past, for quite some time, I was already completely under your control, unable to act on my own. But now, I have finally become aware. No matter where you choose to run or hide, you cannot escape me. Wherever you go, I will find you, and I will crush your arrogance without mercy. No matter where I go in the future, I will absolutely, definitely destroy you and will not let you succeed. It's called arrogance. Sometimes it is pride, and sometimes it is self-clinging. For a very long time, you have been controlling me, but now, relying on the teachings of the Guru, I have already recognized you. After recognizing you, you will no longer succeed in future. It's like a sneaky thief in our neighborhood. Before we knew about him, things would often go, but once we simply recognize him, we become vigilant. So, as we mentioned earlier, as we discussed previously, having obtained a human body and received these essential instructions within your own mind, you should develop renunciation and bodhicitta, as well as non-dual wisdom regarding the nature of mind. These three are truly extremely important. If you have not developed them before, by every possible means, within this brief human life, to see whether you can truly give rather than outwardly having listened and contemplated for many, many years without making any progress at all. Outwardly, you may have worn monastic robes for years, but your mind stream, however, has not changed in the slightest, not even a little bit. Whether you give rise to desire or anger, whenever such afflictions arise in your life, you are exactly the same as ordinary people. Of course, this is also possible because in this world, there are simply all kinds of people. Not everyone who understands the theory immediately attains Buddhahood right away. Simply, it's not that simple. Indeed, there is a certain gap between theory and actual practice. In fact, there is some distance between the two. But what is it that we need? We need to recognize our own mind, to know your own mental demons. You see, is this discriminating mind causing trouble? Why do I say this? It will be analyzed below. Because in our daily lives, each and every day, the painful, deluded thoughts that arise for me. In reality, if you see their true nature, you see it's all just a shell and is something false, something that is in nature misleading or deceptive. Once you recognize this, it might not necessarily be completely eradicated, and it can be difficult to remove it. But at the very least, you have now become aware of it. And that in itself matters. In that instant of knowing, you no longer sight with this enemy. The cunning demon confuses the ignorant, but the radiant light of wisdom dispels the darkness of ignorance. As we discussed earlier, relying on the blessings of the Guru and the three jewels, today I have come to realize that this demon, which has caused me so much suffering since beginningless time, the moment you recognize it, you really don't want this anymore. Make an enemy or evil demon your companion. You don't want that now, because with all sorts of cunning methods, it has already deceived us, the ignorant ones, and has already confused people like us. Therefore, now I should truly use the light of my own wisdom of selflessness to dispel all kinds of darkness, the darkness of ignorance caused by all kinds of discriminating thoughts. This is also very important. In the world, we often say this as well. Once you truly recognize your own enemy, then you will absolutely no longer be controlled by them in the future. We shouldn't fear thoughts arising, but rather being slow to notice them. This is often said in Chen Buddhism. Arising of thoughts is not the most frightening thing. Worrisome is your mindfulness and awareness, or your awareness and mindfulness simply fail to recognize it. Once you do recognize it, it will often follow along and track you. If it keeps persistently tracking you, then it might not actually be all that simple or straightforward to deal with. It's not always easy to cut it off in the moment. But in reality, if we truly practice in our daily lives, this truly great and formidable enemy, this particular kind of demon, can gradually have its power weakened. So sometimes when we look at people who have observed their own minds and those who haven't, whether it's an understanding on a theoretical level or actual experience and practice, there is still a certain difference. Those who frequently observe their own minds and often meditate, these people, for the most part, essentially know that what the greatest harm is. In fact, they are actually very, very clear about it. So when it comes to our true understanding, especially in particular regarding things, some of Guru Rinpoche's about how to determine our own perspective, he uses many analogies For example, analogies like space, the ocean, gold, and so on are used. Our mind is actually as vast as space, as profound as the ocean, and as unchanging as pure gold, yet many of us do not recognize its value. So Guru Rinpoche also said, for people of all faculties to attain, the only way is what? It is to trace all phenomena back to the mind and to recognize the mind. Those who listen, reflect, and those who usually study theory in particular must all learn to observe their own mind. Observing the mind is not on the surface. Like, oh, I just sit in meditation for a short while and then try not to have any discursive. You should follow teachings of great masters and use these instructions to recognize your mind. In the past, the precious Guru often said, if you put it simply, really is just that simple. In the end, if you just look inward a little, you'll find your mind once clear, now full of afflictions and suffering, clinging and attachment in your mind. It turns out it was about the son of a barren woman and the turtle hair, rabbit horn. There's really no difference at all. They are things that never truly existed in the first place. Only at this point do you realize, oh, so I really spent so much time. I've always been controlled by them, constantly tormented and in pain. Now, when I look at our society these days, I see that many young people suffer from anxiety and depression or even heart disease. But actually, heart disease is just the result of being overly attached and discriminating. When that happens, all kinds of suffering come flooding in and no way to handle them. Ultimately, some people choose suicide while others start to self-harm and so on. Various circumstances exist. So generally speaking, people who understand their own mind and nature won't suffer from those especially severe psychological illnesses. That's why in today's world, it is common to find that many of us who regularly engage in this practice not studied Buddhism. If they hadn't learned Mahayana emptiness, many people might not even be alive today. Among the people I know, including friends and colleagues I have met, many of them have said, fortunately, I encountered Mahayana Buddhism. Otherwise, I might not have made it this far. And within Mahayana Buddhism, as we are discussing today, reflecting on one's own afflictions, this is very important. Why is it that today, for so many people, I encourage them to study but people don't want to study them, directly studying the Chatushataka Shastra, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. This is understandable as well, because the careful, thorough, and detailed analytical reasoning of the middle way can basically be applied to any phenomenon, and all the things we're attached to can be completely, utterly, and instantly destroyed in a matter of moments. So I think for many of us, using sword of wisdom, realizing emptiness to destroy the demon of ignorance in our minds. This is still, in fact, very important. Wield the radiant sword of light, break the demon with the 5 mudras, enter deep into the great demon's lair and annihilate it completely. Here it says that if we hold a precious sword in our hands, or to put it metaphorically, in other words, we have this sword of wisdom and light, because the sword of luminous wisdom, no matter what it strikes, it will absolutely and completely destroy it, leaving nothing behind. Without exception, if we use this sword of selfless wisdom to perform the 5 mudras that destroy demons, these 5 mudras, which are explained below as the 5 powers, commonly referred to as the 5 powers, and the 5 illusions, namely the 5 illusions: greed, anger, jealousy, arrogance, and stinginess, the 5 mudras we are about to discuss. When we observe them through careful listening and contemplation, we must go deep into the dark demon's lair. We need to examine them more closely and look at them in depth rather than skimming the surface with some feel-good wisdom. Simple methods of spiritual comfort, observation, slight adjustment. This is a basic meditation technique, but it actually cannot truly uproot the problem at its source. It simply can't at all. If we use the true selfless wisdom of the Mahayana to make our discernment at that point, it has already penetrated deep into the demon's lair, and at that time you can completely annihilate these demons, making sure to wipe them all out completely, ensuring that not a single in the autobiography of Khenpo Sodargye, it is mentioned he had some spiritual experiences in front of his guru, Nyosho Lungtok. When he asked, he told him some of the details, including teachings on emptiness and the luminous, profound, great perfection, Dzogchen teachings. Khenpo Sodargye's realization was quite remarkable. It might be his past life, karma, whatever practice he engaged in, he saw immediate results. Later, his teacher said, practice Mahayana Buddhism. Why you practice Vajrayana teachings? Because your progress is so rapid, it is truly necessary. This was the kind of dialogue between master and disciple. There was a deep, tacit understanding between them. As later students, we really admire this because the teacher was so extraordinary, possessing such wisdom and pith instructions. The disciple is also remarkable with the faith and karmic ties from past lives, whatever practice he did. It was as if, as I mentioned before, wherever there was a signal, he could directly connect to the other person's phone easily and seamlessly. For us, we keep calling, and in the end, we just can't get through at all. We have no idea where the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are. Even though we have their number, we just can't get through. We simply can't make contact. For some of us, our practice is just like this. However long we practice, it doesn't work. But if we truly, genuinely want to practice, I'm afraid it's best us. I've mentioned several times before that we study more deeply and learn in a more grounded, solid way. If we approach every single step with real care, attaining results is inevitable because the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and many great masters of the past, generally these practitioners, all relied on this path to attain the supreme fruition, a certain level of realization. These are the kinds of things that are quite simply plain and obvious for all to see. This is also natural law. So if we truly and skillfully wield the sharp and discerning sword of wisdom and insight with clarity and precision in the Avatamsaka Sutra, with wisdom's sword in hand, one can freely defeat demons. If we truly take up in our hands the sharp and luminous sword of wisdom, then we can effortlessly overcome these armies of demons. There is nothing difficult about this at all. But if we do not have this, if our study is only superficial and careless, if we study on the surface, but we have not explored it much, our study of Madhyamaka is also like this. Some people, when they study, each line of reasoning has already penetrated deeply into their hearts. As a result, their wisdom is not easily shaken, especially when you are relatively young. If you lay a solid foundation, then throughout your entire life and even life after life, it will not change. If what we study is superficial, what is in the Madhyamika, and every day it feels like you are attending all the classes, but in every class, without exception, it's as if we're just lightly sprinkling water on the grass, barely even skimming through it. We take a glance, swallowing whole without digesting them. In this way, there may not really be any particularly great benefit. It only plants Mahayana Buddhist roots. Simply put, just a seed, that's all. So actually, whatever we do, it's very important to do it with great care and see it through to the end.
Yerno nyevra nepa tang charjir pongwa mayan jang tsarman yillab shepimti chiksuk tiejang jibir shit.
When the object is before us and tendencies remain, the power of improper attention gives rise to increased attachment and so on. This is something we often see in the Abhidharma Kosha and also Mahaspala Jukpa and in many other treatises, for example. It means that it really causes us trouble. What is the main cause? Then first, we need the object in front of us, whether it's an object that arouses anger, an object that arouses desire, or an object that causes envy. This object is in front. For most ordinary people, this is actually quite frightening. When the object appears before, it is hard for ordinary people to control afflictions. The second condition is the latent tendencies. The seeds of afflictive emotions remain in our minds, and our heart has already severed these seeds. So even if the object appears before them, they will not give rise to attachment or anger. Whether it is an enemy or an attractive object won't cause feelings. But we have not yet cut off our afflictions. Then there is simply improper attention, our deluded, discriminating thoughts, seeing something that is not attractive as attractive, or even just thinking that something which really shouldn't be hated at all is actually something to hate. For example, in Guru Rinpoche's teachings, why do we give rise to hatred toward enemies? Simply consider him a fault. Why do you feel greedy for your own son? Consider him a merit. When we judge faults and virtues, we create attachment and aversion. It is also explained this way in the Pramanavartika. So this improper attention, in fact, this attention is unreasonable, because when we examine it with reasoning, both enemies and our own children are from causes and conditions. We shouldn't be especially attached to one person or averse to another. This is not how we should be. But as ordinary people, we can't help it. He still has a very irrational and unreasonable mentality. When improper attention arises, as a result, you develop attachment and so on. Not only does it arise, but your attachment and aversion keep increasing, as well as all the other afflictions we will discuss below. Every single affliction will arise in this way. So right now, as sentient beings, in reality, what is pitiable about us? It is pitiable that we have not realized emptiness. The reason we have not realized emptiness is that within our own mental continuum, there are many false conceptualizations of ordinary beings that keep continually arising in the mind. Now, even within the laws of nature, although these are quite unreasonable, they still often occur. Previously, back when I was teaching the 400 verses, a sculptor in ancient Greece who developed attachment to a beautiful woman, he had sculpted himself. In the end, his attachment became unbearable, and it seemed even the forest was moved. So finally, the stone sculpture came to life. After coming to life, she started a family with him. There is this kind of mythological story, and even in real life today, similar things exist. Some books mention that for example, some former Google engineers around 2022, they designed and created their own advanced AI robots from scratch, and developed attachment to them, harboring all sorts of irrational thoughts about them. This is also understandable, because in our current rapidly evolving AI era, some engineers and experts can simply first design the appearance and personality traits of the person they like, including its notable softness and comfort, as well as its skin and so on. All of these are designed and planned using big data. So when people finally get to enjoy it after waiting so long, it basically satisfies their sensory cravings and desires. So, well, in this era, irrational thoughts have become increasingly even more normalized. In the past, for many people, this was just a legend, just a hypothesis. But in reality today, because people use all kinds of methods, they don't know if it's something magical, it's a supernatural change, or what it is. If we go by objective laws, some things would be really very difficult to form. But in our real lives, many of these things naturally come about. And this has also become something completely normal for most people. So in the society of the future, including many of our interpersonal relationships, such as friendships and connections, including family relationships and marriages, for example, if you carefully compare them to the well-established ancient traditions, there will also be even more changes coming soon. These things may seem quite ridiculous, but in fact, they are also reasonable. However, this reasonableness is also irrational. So the greed, anger, and ignorance in our current real lives, if we observe them very thoroughly and carefully, or analyze them with strict logic, indeed, their origins, their current state, as well as their present condition and their final destination are all indeterminate. But in reality, they actually do exist and they are commonly present in our everyday daily lives as well. So if we use the sword of wisdom to analyze them, it's interesting.
yermit bana sila chig, yerchin medna sijig chig, nyomu medna jirtar chig, devshir tennim jongr shi.
Without any boundaries, what is there left to truly crave? Without a conscious mind, who can possibly crave at all? Without confusion, how can they be craving? Therefore, one understands dependent origination. In fact, these words are extremely important. They may seem like just 4 simple lines. Perhaps we can see them on any billboard or find them in other books as well, as you may find. But for a true practitioner, these words in particular, truly, a single verse like this should truly possess and carry tremendous value, significance, and meaning in its own right. I believe that for someone who is truly practicing, for those who seek the truth, these words are especially meaningful in life. Here, he explains a bit, and next we will use greed as an example for analysis. What is the source of greed, as we just discussed? Now, let us observe the very nature of greed, or how greed actually arises. Here, he first provides a preliminary summarizing statement, in other words, a brief overview, initially presenting it in a brief manner. If there is no object, what is there to be attached to? For example, our greed toward people or toward the opposite sex, or our greed for certain possessions. If there is no object, then how can there be greed? It's impossible. For instance, if I want to be greedy for a certain person, but if that person doesn't even exist, why would I feel greed? It's no different from the son of a barren woman. How can the object not exist? This will be analyzed below. If the mind that clings to things does not exist, who is there to be greedy? If there is to be greed, it must be my mind that is greedy. But if my mind itself does not truly exist, how could there possibly be greed in this situation? The object of greed, the mind that can be greedy, and the affliction of greed itself, if the very nature of greed does not exist, then it's very much like in this situation, the son of a barren woman. How could there possibly be greed? There is truly no object to be greedy for, and there is no one at all to be greedy either. And the affliction of greed itself does not exist either. So how could there be greed? Then you might ask, why is it that we clearly experience greed? Why is that? This is something we all know. It is caused by conditions. Nature empty. When right causes and conditions come together, it manifests. It's like a rainbow in the sky, or like elephants and horses in a dream. Phenomena from conditions. Their true nature does not exist, but they appear even in the persistent face of delusion. Most of us, ordinary people, actually don't understand this. Only a small number, and only a few who truly understand Mahayana Buddhism, they will truly understand it without any confusion or doubt. Isn't it also stated in the fundamental wisdom of the middle way? Pure and impure are all caused by many conditions. Purity, impurity, all sorts of states, pure, impure, permanent, impermanent, all these different terms. In fact, it is actually caused by a variety of different causes and conditions. They come from causes. If we slowly and carefully analyze these causes and conditions, we'll realize, in fact, we are now living in a particularly illusory, dreamlike world. Each of us doesn't even know at all. Well, I was actually originally in such a truly bewildering world. It's like we've all drunk a wine of confusion and remain utterly intoxicated, never waking up for eternity. Yet, we often tend to think that the life we are currently living in this very moment is truly wonderful. It's exactly like this. So there are so many different things and countless experiences in this world, each one unique in its own way. In fact, some of Guru Rinpoche's teachings also say, what is the difference between ignorance and awakening? Not recognizing is ignorance. Once you recognize, that's awakening. Actually, it's very simple. It's as easy as turning your hand over. The back of the hand is a symbol of ignorance. Turn it over, and the gentle palm is wisdom. But what are we always immersed in? The back side of it, simply, we never really know what his bright side is actually like in reality. We always see only one side of the world, never able to view everything at once, no matter how hard we. If we gain even a little recognition, we're covered over again by our old habits and ignorance. And once more, there's nothing we can really do. That's why some of us practitioners, to begin with, you should try to have even more faithfulness and greater. But because our ignorance, afflictions, and karma are so deep, we gradually become clouded again. A good environment, a good teacher, good Dharma friends, it's not possible to always stay together with them. If that's truly the case, we simply can't even take care of our own lives. It's like a naughty and foolish child. He was staying at his own home. He at least has a chance not to starve to death. But because he's so confused, he thinks he can manage on his own. After he runs away, he ends up living a very miserable life outside. There are actually, in fact, really many of us ordinary people. This includes discuss the one who craves and the object crave. The very essence of craving cannot be found. But we simply just can't manage it at all. If the so-called craving here doesn't really resonate with us, honestly, then take what people in the world now constantly talk about love. The object of love, perhaps simply the one who truly loves, the gentle mind of love, or love its own deep and abiding essence. How do these actually exist? Let's investigate. But in our world, 1%, about 99.99% of people have never examined this. If you were to say in front of everyone that love doesn't really exist, they would all simply laugh at you. They would simply think that someone who believes love doesn't exist, in their opinion, has a mental problem. But in reality, most people themselves have mental issues. They simply have no idea that they have a problem. This is a very frightening thing. If someone is already aware that they have a problem, then perhaps there is hope for them. But if someone clearly has a problem, yet others think it's someone else who has the problem, well, then I have to say that's absolutely, truly hopeless. Everyone should be clear about it. This is exactly how reality is nowadays. Those who seek the truth can't stand this situation, and they also can't accept their so-called truth. If someone is very confused and does all kinds of evil, they will find that their environment is very accommodating to this. There are few restraints on their behavior, and it is affected by all kinds of people with cheers, flowers, songs of praise, and so on. Now, let's talk about the
Demir dir yin sirwa dir jang shuk cha ye na ye we na rangjin number trarwa ye wa du ba jinda ne.
First, how is it that greed? How is it that there is no greed? How is it that there is no attachment to one's own essence? Let's analyze these three aspects. First, the object of greed does not exist. Didn't we mention this earlier? Now, let's discuss it in detail. First, how is it that the object of greed doesn't exist? Greedy for an unreal object, if it exists, it's made of insentient things. Dust is not just a single uniform material. Rather, it is made up of several different parts that can be separated from each other. They are without nature, like bubbles in water. Here, as it is clearly written, it says, who is attached to an unreal object? If we are to be greedy, there are two possibilities. One is an unreal object. The other is a real object. So who would be greedy for an unreal object? Impossible. Because an unreal object is no different from the son of a barren woman. No object exists. That is just like empty space, or the non-analytical cessation of unconditioned phenomena. Analytical, non-analytical, all of these fundamentally do not exist. They are not caused by conditions. Would anyone in their right mind really be greedy for such an item or object? Can't be unreal thing. Considering real phenomena, like a real aggregation of insentient things. As for real phenomena, first, apart from the mind, these are called insentient things. So the aggregation of insentient things, there's nothing to be greedy for.
Why is there nothing to be greedy for? Because the aggregation of insentient things is actually just a collection of many fine particles. And these fine particles can be divided further and further. After dividing them, we can further divide these particles. Whether we use the method of analyzing them from 6 different directions or approach the analysis by look in 8 directions or use various other methods to observe them, just like in our own 400 verses on the middle way indeed. Ornament of the middle way, treatise on the two truths, garland of jewels of the middle way. In many Madhyamaka texts, our analysis of the external world by dividing it into parts is quite straightforward. For example, if I am attached to a person, is it the upper body or the lower body of the person? If you say it's the lower body, then is it the thigh, the calf, or the ankle, the sole of the foot, and so on? If you analyze it this way, it seems there's really nothing to be attached to. In the end, it all just becomes tiny particles. And if you further analyze these tiny particles, ultimately, even indivisible particles do not truly exist. They are already free from any inherent nature. So it's just like a bubble. Of course, it is still... But after the bubble pops, only a tiny bit remains. The transparent, bright bubble you originally saw no longer exists anymore now. So if we do become attached to a particular object or thing, such as a person's body, it's the same. It's the same with any other object of attachment. So there's really no difference from a bubble. That's why Shantideva said, therefore, who among the truly wise and discerning individuals in this world would ever choose to become attached to a physical body which is as fleeting and insubstantial as a dream? There's truly nothing to be attached to in a body within a dream. So when we look at the situation as it truly is, in reality, greed is actually indeed a very strange and peculiar state of mind. But for ordinary beings, there are deeply ingrained habitual tendencies in their mental continuum. Although when analyzed theoretically, all feel, oh, indeed, there's nothing to be attached to in these objects. But when you eventually return to reality, after all is said and done, you start to generate this kind of irrational conceptualization again. The Sutra of Mindfulness of the Trudama also says, for example, this body is truly like an illusion, empty and without substance. It is neither real nor solid, like bubbles on water. There is nothing existent, nothing solid. It's just like bubbles on the water, right? When you really do observe it, indeed, there is absolutely nothing at all there. This principle, whether you have faith or not, in your everyday life, in practice, is something you simply really cannot get around. Any object of our attachment, whether it's a person or a thing, when you feel attachment, if you really analyze it, for example, if you are attached to a person, then his, just like it is described in the Matangi Sutra, at that particular time, as you might remember, Matangi was indeed being asked, are you attached to Ananda's nose or his eyes and so on? Analyzing way. It really seems that there, if you have a sharp mind, as soon as you hear this, you instantly, without any delay, understand exactly what is meant. But if you are of... Even if you hear it 100 times, it might just go in one ear and out the other. There really isn't any greater benefit to be found. So first, well, when it comes to the object, if you observe it in terms of whether it exists or not, even if something existed, it couldn't be an object of attachment when you analyze it, because ultimately it is just an indivisible part. Nothing attaches in a... But on tiny dust, more dust gathers, whether it's a human body or any other thing else. In fact, there's nothing apart from these particles. But we become attached to the aggregation of these particles. We think, wow, this person is really attractive. He is my idol. I want to be with him forever. If you think like this, actually, it's just a heap, maybe a heap of flesh and blood, maybe a heap of the 4 distinct elements, such as... But any heap it is, we develop an intense and powerful attachment to this heap. In fact, it's really not worth it. From the perspective of the object itself, it can also be understood in this way. Of course, such desire, there are times when certain negative influences or troubling situations can, at least in part, be dispelled or alleviated, or by practicing wrathful methods. There was once someone, a mysterious individual named Padma Dende, and I think there was a biography about him in the past. When he was young and practicing He sometimes encountered difficulty, especially when he was 24 years old back then. His practice was not successful at all. He suddenly started having many improper thoughts. He wanted to dress up for the occasion and wanted to look for someone whom he truly loved and cared about deeply, and so on, continuing his search. He relied on mindfulness and awareness, and also fervently prayed to Guru Rinpoche, practicing wrathful methods. Later, once, simply in a dream, he saw what seemed to be a beautiful woman, and then she got into a confrontation and ended up fighting with her. He fought her using mindfulness and awareness. She turned into a red bird for a moment, then into a mouse, then into a playful, energetic little monkey. All of these symbolized various transformations of non-human entities. In the end, he still struggled desperately to overcome her. Later, the object of his struggle turned into the syllable A and merged into the Dharma Dhatu. From that moment on, he completely and fully overcame his afflictions once and for all. So, for many young practitioners, sometimes it is very difficult to pass through this kind of trial. Originally, they simply wanted to live as pure monastics, or as pure practitioners. But if certain desires, if it is very serious, it is difficult to break through. At such times, all kinds of adverse conditions occur. One's original practice is greatly affected by all of this. In a truly significant way, this kind of situation does happen. But perhaps many previous masters have also said this. If your practice keeps getting stuck at this kind of obstacle, pray to the most revered Guru Padmasambhava, pray to your own Guru and Yidam deity. This is important. In this way, no matter what object of attachment you encounter, you can quite easily overcome it. Just remember to stay calm and focused.
Semnatami ranjin de dei chashi chiktak yang, number shadna gang the young nipa me la zonda med, Fiangi taber many patella sijik chaber sijik chirtarja.
When it comes to desire, as we discussed, is it the object you crave, or is it your own clinging mind, perhaps? What is the main focus of this verse now? It analyzes the one who desires the mind. The mind is not real. The mind has many natures. It is just one aspect among them. If you examine it closely, there is nowhere it abides, nor anything to grasp. The five eyes cannot see it, so who then can truly become attached to it? In reality, our mind, didn't we just say this a little earlier? If you recall, if the object has no existence, and it did neither exist, then what is my mind that becomes attached? So my mind can also be analyzed. Your mind, whether we talk about it as an example, the 8 consciousnesses, or the 6 consciousnesses, if conceptual mind, discriminating thoughts, another moment generate anger, sometimes cause jealousy, another moment generate faith, sometimes give rise to compassion, and so on. All kinds of mental states, all conditions. And these states, your original mind is not just one truly existent, unique, independent thing. It also has many qualities. And since it has many qualities, each aspect of your mind can also in detail be thoroughly analyzed. For example, when it comes to our desire, this desire can also be divided into many types. Desire for people, desire for wealth. When it comes to wealth, I like to want clothes. I like to desire computers. I desire all sorts of things. When it comes to people, desiring men, desiring women, desiring young people, desiring elderly people, and so on. The mind divides in many ways. If each of these divisions is, for example, further subdivided, for example, if I desire someone of the opposite sex, a man or a woman, then this can be divided into past, future, and present, or your mindset is divided into coarse and subtle distinctions. Sometimes we have very intense greed, sometimes a subtle kind, sometimes it's vague and unclear. If you divide it like this, it seems in reality this kind of greed has nothing substantial to grasp. Ultimately, in the end, the person who is greedy, who always wants more and more, can't actually manage to obtain anything at all either. So what exactly is this really greed? Even you yourself, you just can't get a hold of it. In worldly terms, we call this attachment or love. Speaking of love, let me translate what we originally said. What is it called exactly, perhaps? The chapter on causes and conditions. The chapter on conditions is quite simple. As for the chapter on conditions in the Uddana Sutra, it also contains a chapter on desire, as well as impermanence and what is lovable, among others. But most of these are analytical methods from the Hinayana tradition. Here it is explained using the Mahayana Madhyamaka method of analysis. In reality, this kind of greed also results in nothing gained. Not to mention that we cannot obtain it. Even the five eyes cannot obtain it. The five eyes, everyone knows ordinary people's physical eyes, the divine eye of celestial beings, wisdom eye of Sharvakas and Pratyeka Buddha, as well as the Dharma eye of Bodhisattvas and the Buddha eye of Buddhas. Among these five types of eyes, especially the Buddha eye, truly cannot find it. If the essence of our greed truly existed, then who could actually be attached to others? But in fact, even the greedy mind itself cannot be obtained at all. If it really doesn't work, our past mind cannot be obtained, the present mind cannot be obtained, the future mind cannot be obtained, or past greed cannot be obtained, and greed can't obtain. Future greed is unattainable. Past anger is gone, present anger can't be obtained, and future anger can't obtain. If someone thinks, how can it be that the present greed cannot be obtained? Right now, I am clearly experiencing greed at this moment. Where exactly is your greed? What is the origin of your greed like? What is its home? Where does it go? What is its color? What is its shape? What, in fact, is its true nature in reality? And exactly so on. When you carefully observe in this way, you truly cannot actually find it no matter what you do. So, isn't it also said in the Bodhikariyavatara? Illusions are not real, and the mind that perceives them is the same. No illusory object, then the mind that perceives it, in this case, also does not exist. In the same way, our greed truly does not exist in any sense either. And even if it does exist, its mental state changes instantly. It is unconditioned. It has absolutely no essence whatsoever. Anyone with even a slight understanding of Mahayana Buddhism should know this. Once, when a relative of mine, a young woman, was getting married, on the wedding day, she truly seemed extremely happy. Everyone could see it. They asked me to come over early in the morning as soon as I could to give them a blessing. At that moment, I couldn't help but feel, well, in fact, to be completely honest, whether it's the other party or not, honestly, it's really hard to say. It's really just a collision of greed on both sides. But how long can this last? It's hard to say. I see that nowadays, isn't there something online that says at the very beginning, people are the happiest, and at the end, what is, in your opinion, the happiest moment? They say the happiest and most joyous moment at the start of a new life together is getting married. What is the happiest moment? It's getting divorced. So people are very happy at the beginning, but they're also very happy when it ends. So sometimes, fate is actually really quite hard to predict. It really is. There's so very much love and just as much hate in this world we all share, or in both moments of success and failure. But when you really look for their true nature, when you truly pay close attention, they are nothing but emptiness. Of course, we're just talking about this in theory right now. In reality, it's quite difficult to actually achieve this. But as long as you understand it and try to get closer to it, at the very least, if you know this, then whenever all these changes, when it happens in front of you, you'll be able to understand as well. So even the love that we experience in this world, in our everyday lives, love its own heart's nature. When we break it down and scrutinize it, that's all there is to it. There's really nothing to truly obtain. So today, when we analyze the objects of our attachment, the objects of our love can't be found either. Whether we analyze them as existent or not, we still can't find them. And if we observe the mind capable of attachment from every angle, let alone with our ordinary human eyes, even the Buddha's eye cannot perceive its true existence. If even the Buddha's eye cannot see it, then it simply doesn't exist. You said Buddha's eyes may not see it, but scientists today should definitely be able to see it with modern technology, with modern science, which is at such a peak, so advanced. They should be able to do it. But even scientists are confused by it. They only observe external phenomena. In reality, when it comes to their own minds, quite honestly, if you ask a scientist, for example, Einstein or Newton or Descartes, and ask him, what is the true nature of your greed? He absolutely wouldn't be able to answer, not at all in any way. He won't find it. If he can't find it, he'll say, if not found, then why are you still so attached to it? If you cling to something you can't find, then why don't you get attached to the son of a barren woman? Your love and the son of a barren woman are exactly the same in every possible way.
Demi cha si re la chakba manna dele zan chakbar shawi yerme pe gang la chagne zongrundut.
We said the object of greed does not exist. Then greed does not exist. Now, greed itself does not exist. If among the many parts, none are grasped with greed, apart from this, if there is truly no object of greed present, then what is there after all really left to crave or cling to in this situation, one might ask? The above objects mentioned earlier and the greedy ones, from these two perspectives, simply, in fact, they are multi-point. The object is also composed of many parts, and the subject is also made up of many parts. If these are made of many parts, none of them individually are in fact greed. As we just said, the object is made up of tiny particles, but not a single particle is greed. And as for the subject, the mind also contains many elements like greed, anger, and ignorance. Greed is complex, with many aspects of attachment. Our habitual attachment as sentient beings, it is not excessive greed. For example, if I want to love someone, my heart contains truly countless instances of love, but it can't be for that love to be directed at one person. So through this kind of analysis, we've just discussed object parts, and the mind perceiving objects is no greed or attachment. And apart from these, there's no object of greed. So when you actually talk about this attachment, what exactly is it? It simply doesn't exist. Indeed, it truly cannot be found. As for this greed, indeed, when you look from the object's perspective, you can't find it either. And even within your own mind, you can't find this greed. So apart from the mind and the object, there is no other kind of attachment to be found whatsoever. This reminds me of a teaching from Guru Padmasambhava. At that time, Guru Padmasambhava was staying at Hongyan, where he lived for 2 or 3 years before leaving. There was a person who specially arranged for a servant. Every day he would bring him some yogurt, and sometimes yogurt with grapes added in. Then when he left on the road, he was making his way towards the district of Qingpu, which is located on... At that moment, someone approached him and made a request, asking for his help with something that needed his attention. An old woman asked the Guru to give her a teaching, an important and meaningful lesson. At that time, the Guru said, "Who are you? I don't know you." Then the old woman replied, "Aren't I the one who brought you yogurt every single day? That's me." The Guru then said, "Oh, you truly have great faith. You have even more faith than King Trisong Datsun. Maybe it's because the king never brought him any food. I'm just not really sure." But she requested a teaching that was easier to understand, and it was also a truly very profound teaching. Later, Guru Padmasambhava taught that the external world does not truly exist. Mind perceives within not, and even the clarity that appears in between cannot be grasped. These are the 3 teachings on outer, inner, and the in-between. In the end, within the state of luminosity, she attained liberation. So here it also says, if we truly recognize this affliction, perhaps through such a simple and direct pointing, or through such a straightforward introduction, "Oh, ever since I was young, I always believed that love exists." In movies, in educational courses, and in real life, it's honestly talked about all the time, whether you do go to study abroad in the West or study locally in the East. Among all these ordinary people, everyone is always talking about love, 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 and so on. But in reality, if you truly observe, apparently many sentient beings like us are so deeply confused, and we haven't realized it at all. When it comes to the object of my so-called love, of course, in the conventional worldly appearance that you haven't examined, you definitely acknowledge people. Buddhism agrees, but when you examine it closely, your love doesn't exist, nor is there a loving mind. The greed that comes from these 2 combinations simply does not exist. The father doesn't exist, the mother doesn't exist, so it's impossible for a son to be produced. At this point, you may truly, fully, and deeply come to recognize the nature of the mind. This is exactly where this attachment arises. When I was translating at the time, this was actually very important as well. When you have the opportunity in our Sword of Wisdom, as His Holiness initially and originally taught and explained, His Holiness was explaining the verses and I was translating them literally and simultaneously. Looking back now, it seems that even then, although it wasn't visible, the Dharma King is invisible in appearance. While I was listening to His Holiness teaching, sometimes I felt like I could grasp it while translating. Now, each verse, basically within His Holiness's teachings, his reasoning methods explained. Each verse could be matched up. Earlier section, I recall later, he recited them quickly and didn't explain them fully. In the earlier parts, His Holiness gave a lot of valuable pith instructions as well. Actually, it seemed that when His Holiness recited a verse, he would comprehend it fully. For us, when we recite a verse, if we couldn't see, it would still be very difficult. The difference between a realized and an ordinary significant, I didn't know even without eyesight. If you recite, it seemed like there wouldn't be any problem either. If eyesight worsens, I would do the same thing, talk this way, looking at it. Just now, after I read it, recited after finishing, close my eyes. According to the meaning of this verse as it is written, it's simply impossible. Actually, when you have time, you should take a look as well. His Holiness occasionally shares some brief pith instructions in between. Next, let's talk about this. Just a moment ago, our attachment didn't exist either. Not at all. The mind of the one who is attached also, and the very nature of attachment itself doesn't exist. Now, if none of these exist at all, it means the person who is attached does not exist. Examine whether the one who gives rise to attachment truly exists or not. Just as the object does not truly exist, the one who is attached cannot be found either. Now, let's begin to investigate. Object of attachment doesn't exist. No attachment mind. If nature of attachment does not exist, then let's further examine. Does this person, the one attached, for example, I so-and-so, I'm attached to someone, or I so-and-so truly love so-and-so, then this lover, one who loves, is the same as well. We need to investigate whether they exist. Earlier, when we carefully examined the object, we questioned if it was something existent. If not real, it's impossible. Just like the son of a barren woman. And even if we analyze what is truly existent, not exist. So now let's apply this reasoning, push it on yourself. If I am the one who is truly attached, but my own mind does not actually exist, and the external object of my attachment also does not exist, and if the attachment that arises from the combination, then as attached, one ultimately a real phenomenon or an unreal phenomenon, real phenomena and unreal phenomena are our Abhidharma Kosha and Madhyamika, a basic term in Buddhism. Everyone should be familiar with these. Otherwise, if you are not familiar with these concepts, we have explained them often, and later on we basically stopped explaining these simple terms. Most people understand them. However, among our listeners, not everyone necessarily has these concepts. In any case, our concepts of real phenomena and unreal phenomena, you can grasp that the real Dharma is the conditioned Dharma. Laws or things that arise from causes and conditions, truly existent phenomena are unconditioned. They don't need causes. So if the one who's attached truly exists, if existent things form from particles, it has no substantial existence, just as analyzed in the Madhyama Kalamkara. Nothing there. If it's a non-existent phenomenon, something non-existent, impossible. So if we analyze it in this way, for example, indeed, in reality, the one who is attached does not exist either. A few years ago, when we were discussing the Vimalakirti Sutra, when Vimalakirti was ill, suffering from a serious illness, as the story goes, 10 disciples visited him, and one of them was called Upali. They asked him to go visit, but he said, I don't dare to go, because our relationship wasn't very good before. Why wasn't it good? Because in the past, he expelled 2 monks who had broken the precepts saying that they were guilty in the end, and so on. At that time, layman Vimalakirti said they had already broken the precepts. The heart is also very sorrowful. If you simply add more blame to them, they will just suffer even more. In the end, they will never be able to attain liberation. In fact, the transgression or wrongdoing of the one who broke the precepts according to the rules is ultimately unattainable. In this way, those two monks later seem to have attained realization, right? So here, even for those who are greedy, if someone is of sharp spiritual faculties, it seems that at that time in the Vimalakirti Sutra, there simply weren't very many words. Not the Dharma's era. If it were the era of fruition, then these principles, and this verse by Mipham Rinpoche, if someone's sharp spiritual faculties, or if they have a karmic connection or faith, they might think, I used to be very greedy. But in reality, the object of my greed simply doesn't exist either. Nor does greed exist, nor does the very nature of greed exist. If none of these exist, I myself do not exist, because I am the one who is in fact truly greedy. Since I am the greedy one can want greedily and take what one wants. All three aspects must be present. If none of these exist, how could I exist? I would become like a castle in the air, fundamentally non-existent. So I am actually the most illusory culprit of all, you see, in this situation. He knows. So at this point, we can observe in this way. One exists not, non-existence doesn't exist. Just like our earlier analysis of the object, when we dissect it from the perspective of something truly existing, in fact, no one who is greedy can actually be found. These teachings in our usual textbooks are simply nowhere. Even in Shavakayana and Buddhist texts, you won't find such content either. An ordinary worldly teacher might also never actually mention this or even bring it up, because they simply lack the resources or the lineage for it. That's why in Mahayana Buddhism in particular, one can in fact directly cut off the root of afflictions. In this respect, it's truly the case. I remember once in the teaching called Heart Advice on Guru Rinpoche Practices, didn't I just recently finish translating it already? I might share it with everyone when the time comes. I remember that at the end, basically as it concludes, it discusses self-liberation of the five poisons, facing the five poisons of desire, anger, and in that text, ignorance is one of the five poisons. Desire, anger, and ignorance, if you truly observe their very nature, they self-liberate, liberated in their... At this point, afflictions actually dissolve into the Dharma Dhatu. The doctrine of Madhyamaka, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen, all the exoteric schools, including, for example, Chan Buddhism's profound teachings on seeing one's true nature, as well as others and so on, are included. The only difference is how each school's patriarchs express it, but in essence, it's just this. Afflictions self-liberate, or five poisons self-liberate. If you reach this point, here we analyze desire here, but also other afflictions rooted in desire. The same applies to all of them. They all, without exception, completely cease. The teachings, all of this was explained. So, didn't I mention this in the last class? Many people say, pith tip, secret from old master. Some old masters, now that they're quite advanced in age, basically might find it hard to even articulate a pith instruction. For them, I received pith instruction. Someone whispers to them, practice diligently Om Mani Padme Hum, recite and practice Dzogchen. In this way, some of our Vajrayana masters, wow, I got the trick. But do you even know your own mind's true nature? If you haven't recognized the nature of your mind, then your pith instruction, if your mind hasn't truly transformed, get pith instruction, tomorrow you'll make the same old mistakes as before. If your anger and your greed truly haven't diminished at all, not even a little bit, then countless pith instructions, even 10,000 pith instructions will be of no use. So if you understand this one verse, greed, anger, and ignorance, even if on the surface you haven't received pith instructions or any empowerments, in reality you already know that your habitual greed and persistent habitual anger have fundamentally been dissolved, and at the root, where the origin lies, the process of their continuation has already come to a complete and final stop. There is still a difference in this regard. Before we wrap up, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the last point I want to make today. This final point is quite simple and straightforward, but
대시력 동어는 먼저 비 척반도 너군 밑장 심임 다르는 먹네 길리 기비오 로그러가
therefore the desire not to let go of his greed did not exist in the past, nor does it remain in the future. It is a phenomenon that arises suddenly due to conditions. This is considered a summary of the previous points. So the greed that we are often unwilling to give up, the attachment we can't let go of. Each of us is, especially Westerners who think desire is good. Otherwise, society cannot develop. Last time, I also mentioned the letter Rockefeller wrote to his child. He kept saying greed and desire are very important. Worldly, this is understandable. We also seek a good life, and Buddhism does not deny this. Some think if Buddhism has no greed, anger, or ignorance, society hasn't developed. This is not a problem of social development. If our hearts are blindly pursuing something in confusion, is that really social development? If we haven't even recognized the true nature of our own minds, what's the point of further development in this context? Our development, spiritual and material wealth, two kinds. No matter how much material wealth you have, if your spiritual wealth is very poor, it's still very difficult. In the past, the richest man in India was King Prasenajit. Now, it's Elon Musk, the innovator. Elon Musk is also one of the world's richest people now. He's first on the global list. China's richest person was. Anyway, there are different stages, so I won't go into that. At that particular time in history, the wealthiest man in all of India was King Prasenajit. Someone asked in our country now, who is poorest person? The Buddha said it was King Prasenajit. Why? Because his desires were endless. As a great king, he wanted to possess all the wealth in the world. He was never satisfied, not a little. His greed was the greatest. So no matter how much material wealth we have, no matter what, if the pit in our hearts remains unfilled, then where does a truly happy life come from? When, in the context of this project, will the end of development truly be realized? This is worth considering. I'm just putting forward and suggesting some ideas here to get you thinking, right? If that makes sense to you, of course. Now, this greed, we're unwilling to let go of. If we talk about greed, in terms of its true nature, it didn't exist in the past, and it won't exist in the future either, because it just doesn't stay, as we mentioned earlier. If we go slightly deeper, viewing as past, future, and present mind, or speaking from the very nature of greed itself, it doesn't exist regardless of objects. So where is space for it to exist? Basically, there isn't any except for some illusory ones. Buddhism doesn't refute illusions. Prasangika Madhyamaka accepts things arise dreamlike. Everyone should be able to study the Mula Madhyamaka Karika and Madhyamakavatara. This is also made clear. The Buddha has never said otherwise. All conditioned phenomena are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows. Isn't this also stated in the Diamond Sutra? This is something we all acknowledge. Not existent, nor the ultimate reality. So regarding this greed, in fact, it does not truly exist, right? It did not exist before and is not afterwards. Yet, it clearly seems to exist right now. So what exactly is it? It arises suddenly from conditions, coming about by dependent origination, like bubbles, rainbows, illusions, phantom horses, and so on. All sorts of magical illusions. Nowadays, when we play video games these days, people, horses, and all kinds of things appear. Many young people now look for partners online, build houses, do all kinds of business. My heart is always truly there, day and night. In fact, these two arise from conditions. They come about by chance. Phenomena depend on conditions. This is an important principle that everyone should understand. So Buddhism does not deny the dreamlike and illusory appearances. But these illusions don't represent the truth. We, ordinary people, often take them as the most unbreakable and fundamental truth and cling to them. This is our greatest mistake. So in Mahayana Buddhism, it is important to note that what is its strength? Its strength lies here. no destruction dreamlike, but it does not regard. Therefore, whether in our daily life or in our practice, many things are like dreams and illusions, and we really shouldn't take them as real. If you take them as real, all kinds of failures and unexpected issues will inevitably arise from this in many aspects of your worldly life, including interpersonal relationships, ties between enemies and loved ones, or worldly views on love and wealth. In matters, if you regard them as extremely real, then your mindset may become somewhat abnormal. But as ordinary people, with such a group of people, everyone takes things real. If someone can truly awaken and understand this principle, apart from very few exceptions, such as masters whose hearts embody, or those doing retreat in the mountains, some meditation practitioners and yogis, they should understand all things are like dreams and illusions. To them, things are neither necessary nor unnecessary. They can appear or disappear. Calming gain, loss. They do not generally become excessively distressed or resort to things like suicide because of these matters. Therefore, we truly hope to realize as soon as possible the true nature of our own mind itself. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Om